in architecture and urban planning. I am very much pleased to welcome our speaker of the today, Dr. Kakuli Shah. So, all the participants kindly join me in welcoming Dr. Saha. Uh, Dr. Kakuli, madam, I am my special thanks for your kind support you extended for the development of this, the course contents and schedule of the this program. So kindly accept this. And okay, so I'll start with the brief description of the introduction about the Kakoli madam. Dr. Kakoli Saha completed her PhD in Applied Remote Sensing in 2010 from Kent State University, Kent, Ohio, USA. She has joined School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal as an assistant professor in 2014. Since then, she has successfully completed many professional assignments. Dr. Saha was coordinator for doctoral program and was principal investigator for DST project under Young Scientist Scheme 2012 to 2015. Currently, she is heading Geoinformatics Center, School of Planning and Architecture, Bhopal. Her research interests span over application of GIS and remote sensing in physical planning and architecture. She is also author of several scholarly articles as well as books. And Dr. Saha is a recipient of prestigious Erasmus scholarship under the framework of Erasmus Plus Global Mobility Program 2016. So, welcome, ma'am, and kindly share your expertise in this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the introduction. And this is the first time I am meeting you guys in this under this short training program. And today, what I will do is that I will share how we can use GIS in the architecture and planning project, where planning project have been using GIS for a long time now, but for the architecture, specifically in India, it is kind of new, and people sometimes feel very lost that how to use this. And I had the same experience in the SPA. When I came, I was given the duty of teaching GIS to Masters of Urban Design students, and I was like in a lot of confusion that how to teach them, because there was no reference as such. So then I took up the challenge, and then later on I developed it also. So without any further delay, what I am going to do is that I will share my experience that the different projects I did about using GIS into the topic or the theme, so called, which is very much previously related to architecture, only architecture. And I am just keeping my camera off. I don't think that would be a much of a problem to enhance my audio quality. And I will keep checking if I'm audible to you. So please bear with me in that respect, because it happened to me sometime that I keep talking, and then after quite a significant time, I realized that I got disconnected. Okay, so without any further delay, I start presenting. Is my PPTs visible to all of you?
Ji ma'am, yes ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. So application of GIS and architecture and urban planning, that was the topic we are discuss today. The first GIS attempt was developed in the late 1960s. But it was not popular in academia due to the high cost of hardware and the limited capabilities of the software. Now, in 80s, it was first time got installed at different levels in urban and regional government in Europe and America. So it's so-called developed world. And in developing world, it started to gain popularity during the 90s. And planners have started to use GIS tool for like management, visualization, analytics of spatial data to provide solution to planning related problems. Now, what was the benefit of using GIS? I believe most of you are architects over here. And, not in our country, in other countries also, the architects were in the forefront of the planning projects in any other countries. And they mostly use CAD, as we all know, that 5-6 years ago, even in any town planning department, if you go, and they will provide the maps in CAD only. And then gradually, as the GIS started to pick up, the shift was happened from CAD to GIS. Now, why GIS? What are the benefits you will get in using GIS over CAD? Why you as an architect, as a civil engineer professional now have to attend this type of training program on GIS? It is a very common question that might come up. See, as I think and I saw and I observed and I experienced that there are several advantages of GIS over the CAD. And first of all, in the GIS provide you, I think now today is the 4th day and you guys all have learned how you can add latitude and longitude in your image, in your map. And as a result of that, whatever you do, any measurement you do, that would be true to the earth, right? So that is the biggest advantage, because you know why, if you do any kind of measure, suppose for an example, if you calculate the area of any particular feature, that will be the true to the area on the ground. So that is one of the major advantage of the GIS, and that's why it has been declared that all the Amrut cities should have a master plan made in the GIS only. Besides this, there are several benefits. One example which I listed here: better access to map data. Map data ultimately leads to improved map accuracy. So there is one thing that you prepare your map, second thing you prepare accurate map. Accurate map, actually contribute a lot on the accurate urban planning, success of urban planning. And it helps to better maintain and manage map data, because GIS have lots of feature which actually is not available in the CAD. And so because of that, there are so many features to maintain and manage the data. Makes data collection and manipulation at mass scale easy. Okay, so GIS has the capability to deal with mass scale data. We can create the database management system. I don't think you guys have been introduced to that, because in a 5-6 days short course, you cannot cover so many things. But you have probably noticed that when you create the data in the GIS, you can, there are layers of projection embedded in there, are layers of attribute. That's the main advantage over CAD, is that GIS automatically create attribute table for you, and you can put in number of information about the feature you are digitizing. Planners can perform combinations of spatial and semantic queries. GIS let you to make query. I think you guys have already been introduced to query building, right? You can do query building regarding spatial query, numerical queries, all that stuff. So it is something which actually in CAD you may not be uh, able to do in such efficiently. And urban planners can explore a wide range of what if scenario. What we in the planning we call it scenario building. Planning is what allotting the research, allotting the resources, by estimating the future need. So, and for the future need, we need to make scenarios, right? There are needed scenario buildings are needed. So all these things, can be done very well in the GIS, because in the GIS, it's just a click of a button. You create different maps. Okay. Urban planners can use GIS model to forecast the extent and location of urban growth and to estimate the planning actions, impacts of the planning actions. So modeling is something which can be done in the GIS very easily. Now my slide is not moving. I don't know. Yeah. Sometimes my computer really acts very funny. I don't know why it does. Okay. So GIS in architecture, it is comparatively new in architecture, and GIS has, there are long debate actually. Since I am in the architecture and planning school specifically, I started to teach GIS to the architects because those master students of urban design landscape, they're already architects, right? And I have had an experience of lots of confrontation from them, to be tell you very frankly, that, and which is I found pretty normal, all they learn, they learn several software, SketchUp and Revit, and there are like CAD, AutoCAD, of course. But what GIS can give them extra? And they were saying architects basically deals at the building level, right? And the GIS can't work in the building level, right? So how it can help us? That was the big question. It was a big question. And if you look at the literature that the GIS has already been applied specifically in the cases of pre-design, I also show you today itself an example how it can be used in the pre-design phase, and on the basis of the results of GIS analysis, there are several architectural designs can be done and developed. The benefits of using GIS in the architecture: an architect can use GIS for combining information about layers of geology, soil type, infrastructure, demography when planning for the structure, which we popularly call as a site planning, right? All of the architects will agree with me. In planning also, we teach students about the site planning. Like before you propose anything in the site, you have to first understand the site, right? So site planning is very important, and GIS can play a really very important role in that. Because why? Because it can hold separate layers together, and it can actually perform several analyses. It will let you perform not only the layers on the top of each other, but you can do several activities on the layers itself. Like, I don't know whether you have been introduced to spatial analysis, that you can do the buffer, you can do the clipping, you can do the intersect, lot of things from which you can extract useful information about your site. Am I audible to you?
You're very much audible, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. And the site qualities such as views, daylight, shadow. In the GIS, there are very good tools available for the shadow analysis, And GIS behavioral mapping can help to predict users' performance in the preparation of a designed environment. Now, examples. Now I come to the main, focus of my lecture, that is the examples. This is the project mapping universal accessibility using GIS. This is one the project we have taken up under the Design Innovation Center uh, for the project of universal accessibility for the heritage sites. And it was the Ministry of Education funded project that we are having for more than 5 years now. So SPA Delhi is the hub and SPA Bhopal is the spoke for it. And under this project, we were doing the regular accessibility in terms of analysis, in terms of the persons with disability. Um, so what is, like, if I want to understand the disability, if a person's having disability, what does mean? That there are barrier. When I don't have access to something, that means there is a disability, right? In the layman language, it is like that only. Now, what is a universal accessibility? Now, an architect and disability advocate, Ron Massey, first coined the term universal design, and he defined it as the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. Unlike Western countries where the concept of accessibility and universal design originated, Indian disability is ingrained in poverty, rural life, and social differences. And which is very much true, and for that reason only, when I started to work with these architect ma'am here, she's a professor, Professor Rachna Khare, and she's the PI of this project. And I started to think that if we do have so much of population live in our country with disability, why don't we see them? When we go outside in the road, how many persons with disability do you see except for the beggars? In the 15 years back, when I went to the USA, before going to the USA, I never saw a person with disability at that time was roaming around in the street or doing the regular course, like, they're doing shopping or driving a car or living all by himself or herself. I never saw all those things. I don't know about you, but 15 years back, I never saw them. First time I saw all these things when I reached to the US, that a person with disability driving his or her car all by himself or herself without any assistance, moving around without assistance, and living day-to-day life without any assistance over there. So why don't we see them as regular, people, like doing their regular kind of activity around us? Because of these things, because of there are several stigmas, and there are several, unavailability of resources or unavailability of universal access. Okay. So with that thought, I thought of using, it as a project So we did a project and we had a couple of publications out of that. And first of all, how GIS can help. It took me really long time to convince the PI that GIS can contribute. How? The question is how. So the GIS can be used to map accessible public resources. Okay, GIS is a tool for mapping. It can map which is accessible public resources, Information used by member of disability organization and advocacy groups can be consolidated through the GIS. So there is another way through which GIS can help us. And there is a strong coincidence of functionality between a GIS and human cognitive mapping abilities. Now, GIS have been used for mapping of disability by a lot of people. When I started to do literature review, I was astonished to find it has been using GIS has been used by several scholars for a long time now. As you can see over here, the references of these scholars and their year of their publication, you can see it's there for a long time now. And GIS has been used to make navigation easy. The scholars have used GIS to facilitate navigation of people with visual impairment. And ERE used GIS for mobility support for all pedestrian, including the disabled and elderly people. So we thought of doing this, and we selected a study area which is in Ujjain city. Now, why we have chosen Ujjain? There is obviously a background for it. Ujjain is a religious city. That they have Mahakal temple, which is very famous, and they host Kumbh, which is a very popular pilgrimage. Now the question comes: why the religious city? Right? Why we have to do study on a religious city in the first place? What is the connection between a religious city in India and persons with disability? There is a connection actually, because according to the, us among Hindus, we believe in rebirth, right? Multiple births. And we believe that a person is disabled because he or she has done some sin in their previous birth. And by doing some pilgrimage or religious ritual, he or she can get rid of that sin. And in the next birth, he or she will be a able-bodied person. Okay? So, religious cities are visited by a lot of persons with disability. The study we did is from the perspective of a visitor with disability. So the methodology was that we did multi-criteria evaluation. Multi-criteria means we took lots of criteria to evaluate whether a particular city is universally accessible or not. I will come to all of those in gradually. So the research included 4 steps. First, selection of road stretches. So if I show you through image, it will be much more clearer to you. Now this map on the top left, this is showing the municipal boundary of the Ujjain city. And inside that there are road network of the entire Ujjain that we digitize. You can see in the pale gray color, right? Can you all see this map?
Yes, ma'am. Small zoom, I think, will also help if it can be done.
I'm like doing it a full display actually. Okay, I escape from and I zoom.
madam.
So this one is the map, which is actually showing you the entire road network, and this is the Shipra River within the Ujjain city. And then what we did is that the entire road network, as the project was like to assess universal accessibility from the perspective of a mobility of a visitor with disability. Okay, so it was like in terms of the mobility. So the road stretches we actually divided into three parts. Like when a visitor entered to a city, what through which he or she enters, either by railway station or by bus stands, right? We didn't took airport because Ujjain didn't have any airport. The nearest airport is in the Bhopal, and airports are generally accessible, and that kind of people or population who can afford airports, who can visit airports, was not the target of our research. Okay, so this top right, this map, they are the road stretches along the city entry points. Okay, so then we took a sample from that. Obviously, we cannot take all the roads along the city entry point. So there was a main two station in the railway station in the Ujjain, the railway junction, main Ujjain railway junction, and there is a Vikram Nagar station. If you can see, is lower right. And in the main Ujjain railway junction, we took multiple platforms over there. And there is two bus stands through which interstate buses ply, the Rajabhau bus terminus and the Nanakhera bus terminus, these two. Okay, so so a person after with disability, a visitor after landed in the city, enters into the city, what next? That he or she will go to accommodation point, right? So the next category was the city entry point to accommodation points, right? And we selected road stretches on that. So after settling in the accommodation point, what the visitor do? The visitor go to the religious places or touristy places, other heritage points, right? So these are the three road categories we have taken. We have categorized the entire road network into these three categories. And within that, we have taken samples. As you can see, the sample road stretches are highlighted, okay, with darker shades. So we take samples on the basis of the footfalls. So the next step was preparation of universal access audit checklist. So we took reference of several checklist, several data set, not data set, it's a checklist, guidelines, strategies. Like if you are familiar that 2016, the government of India has launched Sugamya Bharat Abhijan, Accessible India. So they provided there lots of checklists over there, lots of guidelines how to make the places, specifically the public resources, public places accessible. And we also took the reference of a report that was published by the Ministry of Tourism on the accessible tourism, that if a person with disability intend for a touristy visit, what she or he faces at different stages, right from the booking to the going to hotel, or then visiting the visiting the religious places, all those things. So consulting all those literature review, there are two types of checklists we prepared. One checklist is for city entry points, that's the category 1 road stretches, and another checklist for the public realm, which is category 2 and 3 road stretches. There are 11 to 9 indicators were there in each checklist. I will just show you now. And each indicator has 5 to 30 parameters. I'm not going to show you the parameters. If any of you are interested, I can show you separately because they're pretty long and cannot fit in a PowerPoint. But the main indicators, I can definitely show you these things. As you can see in front of you in the screen, that the city entry point had the 9 parameters. And there were a couple of, there were a few parameters which are very unique for that particular type of checklist. One of them is the reservation and information counter for the city entry point, toilet facility, platform, sitting area. All those are highlighted. They are very typical for the city entry point checklist. For the public realm, that is parking space, approach to building, planned pedestrian routes, subway, footover bridges, barrier and hazards are very typical indicators for public realm category. Rest of them are the same for both of the categories like signages, curb ramps, walks and paths, stairs, lifts, tactile guiding and warning blocks. And each of these indicators, as it says, as is mentioned previous slide, that they had 5 to 30 parameters through which actually we measured the accessibility of each of these indicators along the road stretches. Now my slide again stopped. Okay. Now the next step was to feed these checklists in open source software, and that is a mobile application actually that's called API Collect 5. And it is free, one of the main advantage of it that and you can take a number of surveys using these, and we fed that, which are kind of these. We made the survey sheet in the API Collect 5. In the advantage of it that the student make this survey sheet in the lab, in the computer, and then they install that app in their mobile phone, smartphone, and open that project on the site, and then collected the data like this. All you need to have your smartphone. So you don't have to anymore carry the bulky, paper, pen, and the survey sheets and all that stuff. So we told students that if a particular parameter does exist, give 1. If it is partially exist, then 0.5, and it does not exist, then put 0. Now, why 0.5? Because in India, it is very difficult to find something which fully exists, some of the parameters. And most of the cases, it will come as a 0 if we don't keep option of in between. So the in between option was 0.5, and the numerical scoring was needed because we had to generate a map in the GIS. So to generate any map in the GIS, it is needed to be numerically coded. So that's how the data was collected. So after the data was collected in the app, the advantage of that app is it let you download the data in .csv file. As we all here familiar with the Excel, we know that we can import that CSV file in the Excel, right? And make it Excel file and do all the Excel operations. What kind of Excel operations we did is actually we calculated the relative score for each of the indicators. As we can see here, these indicators, raster, reservation and information counter, toilet facilities, these were the 9 indicators of the city entry points. And why did we have to calculate the relative percentage? Because, as I said, that every indicator had the parameter ranging from 5 to 30. So if an indicator scoring 2 out of 10 and then another is scoring 10 out of 20, so they are not similar, right? So to compare them, we have to bring them in a equal platform. So that's why we calculated the relative percentage in the Excel itself. So then after that, it was the GIS analysis, the fourth step. So using the display XY data tool, we displayed that in the GIS, all the points from where the data were collected. As you can see here, one sample. Though this is the ARC map, as you can see the browser, but it can be done in the QGIS also. And then we use a tool, which is a very much usable tool provided by the GIS, is the inverse distance weighted IDW tool. Now, what does it do? As you can see here, these are the point data, right? These are this so-called, in the GIS language, we call them discrete data. And from the discrete data, we can create a continuous data. Okay. So, like I can give you an example. For an example, that temperature, weather data, we always get from a point, right? Because the weather station is where, and from that point only we can get weather data. So it's all a point data, right? Now, in case of Bhopal, the weather station one is the MP Nagar, another is the in the airport. So what if I want to know the weather of a place in between NP Nagar and the airport? So which weather station data will I apply? Okay. So what if I create zones of the particular weather, and then I can get the weather information of any place in the city, right? So this is what is the zones. IDW let us to create zones of accessibility, right? On the left hand side, what you see is that we use the IDW to create the zones of accessibility in terms of curb ramp. If you remember, the curb ramp was one of the indicators. So the black, more towards the darker, it was the lower the accessibility. Okay. So those point layer, we converted into the raster layer continuous data. So then on the right hand side map, we just reclassified it. That's all we did. We reclassified into the three distinct classes, that low, medium, high. So in this way, we actually created all the 9 raster layer continuous data. Okay, for the city entry points, and all the 11 raster layers or continuous data for the public realm. And then we use overlay analysis available in the GIS called weighted sum tool in the GIS. And where we put the weightages. See, all the indicators does not have the equal weightages, right? So how do we find the weightages? We actually took the expert opinion on that. So as you can see in the last point, as there were 11 indicators, like for the public realm, the weightages were given in order of 11 to 1. For example, platforms got the maximum weightages, that was 11, and stairs got the minimum weightage, that was 1. So this is the final map. Okay. But this final map, obviously it's not for the pan city, but it covers most of the city. Unlike, here and building wise data. That was the whole plan, right? Because, for the building wise data, how can you extrapolate that data to a city level? Planning always done at the city level. Okay. So how can you extrapolate that to a pan city, or at least part of the city data? So this map we generated, and as you can see here, there are points, those along which the data was collected, were overlaid on top of this continuous map. So from this point, actually, we generated this map. So this map is actually showing you the zones of high, medium, and low accessibility. And as we can see, the Ujjain railway station on the top left, and you can see the corresponding images also. It is located on the high accessible area. And both of the bus stand, site 6 and site 5, they are the low accessible area. Now then, we kind of, interpreted it. That now that we have a map showing zones of accessibility, some places falling within the zone of high accessibility, some places are falling within the zone of low accessibility. Now, why it is so? We went to detail of that. And went to detail on that, we went to the table we constructed. And we found several of inferences. I give you 2 examples because all that examples will be very monotonous for you. For an example, site 3 or platform number 5, as you can see in the map in the top left, Ujjain railway station scored 0 in the carb. The findings were analyzed using psychosocial perspective. That existence of carb ramp will not only help visitors with locomotor disability, wheelchair and crutch user to access the sidewalks, it provides them a sense of safety as they are away from the busy street. Absence of it may cause sense of insecurity among them. These locomotor disability, wheelchair, crutch user, all were taken while making the checklist. We actually took 8 types of disability. So accessibility issues are embedded in the wide range of interaction taking place at social, psychological, psychosociological, all these things. Improving the accessibility of built environment is not only about removing disabling barriers, but a strategy for facilitating an active and self-determined lifestyle when living with an impairment. As I started with the lecture, that we don't see that persons with disability around us living with self-determination. They always need assistance because our cities are not customized. Our cities are not built in that way so that they can live with their self-determination and self-respect. Okay. The proposed GIS technique can help the local administration to create a built environment in Ujjain that supports participation from visitors with disability. How? Now, the developing inclusive space for individual as vulnerable embodied person in the urban environment is a continuous process. And GIS can be instrumental. See, GIS is a dynamic tool. You can always keep changing the parameters and generate different maps. So GIS can contribute in this continuous process. Exchange of information between government organizations will reduce the uncertainty for the decision making. For an example, Ujjain is a smart city. And all the major urban investment will happen through the smart city mission. And we all know in the planning documents, there is phasing, right? Phasing of how to use the government fund. And if we make this kind of map and tell the authorities, see, this is the lowest accessible zone and this zone you have to develop first. So it will ultimately help them to prioritize their monetary allocation. And if Ujjain city becomes accessible, then it will generate more revenue, that more and more people persons with disability, they can visit the city. See, they are the significant portion of our society. If we exclude them from everything, how can we grow? As they say, we grow when we grow together. We cannot grow excluding a significant portion of our society. That's something is not possible. So by making cities accessible, by not only is for their benefit, for benefit of the residents over there, because more people visit, the more revenue will generate, and that will ultimately go development of the city itself, right? So it will ultimately improve the quality of the life of the residents of the city. Am I audible to you?
Yes, madam.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And if you want to read more about it, and because it's not possible to describe the entire research. If you want to read more about it, more detailed, this is the paper we actually published in Geo Journal, and I can also give the paper to ma'am. Ma'am can circulate to in a group. I believe you guys already have created a WhatsApp group or something like that. So detail will be can be found over there. And this one is one of the examples of how we can create this map for micro scale also. That is for the a macro scale, the city level mapping. This one we created for the only for the ghats in the Ujjain city. There is a Shipra river along the Mahakal temple, as you can see. So this micro level scale also can be represented through that kind of map. Is there any question answer session is afterwards? Okay, never mind. Because I'm going to show you another example. That's why I was thinking that up to this point, if you have any question. Now, GIS in the urban design, that one of the class project we did for the urban design students, with the urban design students, not for the urban design students. If any of you from the Bhopal, you must know that there is MP Nagar, and it is one of the CBD of Bhopal Central Business District, and there's lots of activities goes on over there, and these maps at the bottom show the location of that place. So that place was chosen, and considering the footfall of both men and women users, the site is chosen to understand the gender movement pattern and their use of urban precinct. Now, what we did, how we did this project, the three distinct users were identified: the students, the women visitor, the shoppers or the visitors, and the women users, And the location data for both male and female at the site is collected through API Collect 5, which I already explained. And the GIS comes in the place that we generated a proportional point symbol map for both male and female, footfall. As you can see here, this map, I don't know whether it has been taught to you, but in the GIS, you can generate different types of thematic map, ranging from the choropleth to proportional symbol to point symbol, anything. And those maps, unlike AutoCAD, you don't have to do it all by yourself. You have to just, put the information in the attribute table and choose any of the thematic type or symbology through which you want to generate. Like for an example, I'm giving you that in the AutoCAD, in the Photoshop, architects generally use this kind of map. They generate the circles, and the circles of which diameter that will be, they have to choose all by themselves, right? For the bigger footfall, bigger circle, and the smaller footfall, small circle. But in the GIS, I can tell you that it actually it calculates and proportion the radius of the circles on the basis of the data you put. As you can see, in this legend. Actually, all these point symbols, they are not arbitrarily put, or they have not been put by the user or the maker of this particular map. It is actually scaled on the basis of the data you put. So it is much more accurate. Okay. So these are the number of the male footfall in the entire area, MP Nagar area. And another is for the female footfall, another map was created. Now what was done is that interpreting from this map, what we can understand, we interpret that the concentration of male footfall is higher than the female. Activities present on site support male interaction more than female, resulting into spaces mostly occupied and used by them. Third places, like that of tea, pan, cigarette stalls, are visited by men, omitting women from the space, and the sparse concentration of female who accessing it for designated purposes and used it as a transit areas. Activities currently present do not encourage women flow freely. So we did an overlay analysis. One of the advantage of the GIS, what we did is that we put the point symbols representing the female on the top of the male. Now again, if the case for some area, if the male and female footfall will be same, what will happen? They will overlap each other and we cannot see it, right? So what we did is that we kept the proportion right, but made the sizes small for the female circles, as you can see here, so that we know that what is the proportion of the female to male over here. So what we did from this kind of analysis, what is the outcome, what is the result? As I was telling you in the beginning of the presentation, right, that GIS can be used in the pre-designed phase, right? We can do GIS analysis and we can extrapolate the result while making the design. So for making the design, what we do, we do the issue identification, and the issue identification can be done through the GIS analysis very well. So the issues we identified, the non-interactive built edges, like place A, if you can see here, in the place A is the non-interactive built edges, lack of safety, security in the in the place B, dead public places in the space C. So what was the proposal? The proposal were pretty detailed. I'm not going to in that much of detail. I'm just giving you some of the examples. That for an example, at place A, where the responsive built edge was proposed by proposing a built space with vertical zoning, such as ground floor with commercial use, the middle floors for the commercial come residential, like paying guest, hotel, studio, apartment, and the topmost floor for offices and businesses. For place B, interactive built spaces were proposed. Place C, the interface of open space and street to remain visually permeable, if not accessible. Okay, so these proposals were made. So now that I am done with my presentation, I can show you all these analyses can be pretty conveniently done in the QGIS, and the entire motivation behind using the QGIS came to me when I saw that I took so much of effort teaching these masters of architecture, urban design, and landscape architecture student GIS. And I then see they don't use it. They learn it, they do project very well, show lots of interest, but they don't use it in their professional life. What was the reason? I felt that in the most of the cases, as you all also relate to that, the architects joined in the farm, generally they're small farms, or they practice by themselves, they create their own farms. And initially they don't have that funding to buy a software like proprietary softwares. Like one license of the proprietary software of GIS, like ArcGIS desktop, cost about 10 lakhs. Okay, so they don't have access to that in the the situation of accessibility. So what they learn, they don't never get the opportunity to apply, and that's a very tragic, I believe. So I started to explore what are the open source or the free resources. And on the basis of that, I got inclined to these QGIS, and I wrote a book actually, which is a lab book, which will, uh, you know, give you the step-by-step instructions with the Indian relevant data. All the lab books so far available in India are basically written by the Americans, and they use American examples, of course. And often I found students, I initially used them when I used to teach to the students in offline classes. And I found that they sometimes, most of the time, they fails to relate themselves to it. And I thought that there should be some book which actually uses Indian data, so that people, students can relate. So this is the book, and the Indian stock has not been launched yet. It is at the global pricing, what you are seeing here. And if you order now, it will come from the US or UK. That's why this high price you are seeing over here. Uh, within 1 month, it will be available in the Indian pricing. Okay. So that's all. So if you have any, I'm now stop presenting. If you have any particular question, you can always feel free to ask.
Amazing presentation, madam. I am just overwhelmed by the facts and the potential of software and the way you presented. Uh, can we hear queries from the participants?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So it's open for discussion. Any query from participants?
Madam, any online documentation system available in a GIS? For example, if I'm working on a water supply scheme, I conduct the survey, I finish the scheme. But later on, suppose after 10 year, 15 year, once again somebody want to continue that work. So it is possible to store such type of data with the GIS attributes on global platform?
Unfortunately, no. That's the data sharing is the biggest challenge India has. And there is no platform available. There was lots of talks were going on at one point, I remember, to make a platform where you can store the data, but I have not heard any of that have materialized so far. So unfortunately, no.
Thank you. One more question.
Yes.
Okay. Means you connected with a master student. Again, interest in a master student that vary. Means if we continue one topic, then next time that topic continue by other student maybe after 3 or 4 years. Okay. So So in that case, how you transform the information from one student to the another student if they are working on any GIS project?
See, master students, you mean masters of architecture students or the planning students you are talking about?
In general, any master student or a BTech student, if they are working on any GIS project, and
Okay.
after that, if somebody want to continue that project, maybe after 3 or 4 years, so in that case, how to transform the data?
You know, sometimes we actually tell students to select some other site, even if in our institute policy, we don't encourage the student to take up the studio, even the site, because all of the students have done work in the studio for a particular site, say Bhopal, and then one student select a thesis on Bhopal, and she should have all the ready-made data. But we discourage them to do that, and we always keep and track, because in our institute we always keep a repository of all the theses electronically. So we discourage them to select the same topic. But yes, what you are hinting at, the transform of the project, yes, of course, that can be done. Like for an example, if you do the accessibility, you do the suitability study of landfill site in your project, then the next year if another students come for the suitability analysis of a landfill site, we always encourage, first of all they have to select a different site, and then second of all, it should not be a copy pasted, there should be some other attributes, other perspective added to it. We generally guide them through that way.
Thank you.
And there was, like, in the chat box, there is one question I can see: which GIS tools were largely used for both Ujjain and MP Nagar project? In MP Nagar project, they have used the QGIS, and there is GIS tool. Means, are you asking for the software or the particular tool? The particular tool, if you are referring, in the QGIS and also in the ArcMap, there was a tool called proportional point symbol. Yeah, proportional point symbol tool for the MP Nagar project, and that available in any GIS software. That's very common, like for preparing thematic maps. And in the weighted sum overlay tool we use for the Ujjain project, and then IDW I already mentioned. And IDW, I explored that can very conveniently done in the QGIS, but I still have not explored honestly how to do weighted sum in the QGIS. I'm pretty sure it can be done, but the QGIS is something which I started to explore since the COVID started. So from like 2019 or something, actually before COVID started, so late 2019. So I have not explored that particular overlay analysis, but I'm pretty sure it can be done in the QGIS too. Is there any other questions?
Madam, you talked about user identification of user behavior pattern. So that will also be at planning scale or at micro level also.
What,
Like
ma'am? User?
a user preferences pattern analysis or things like that. User
Oh,
preferences.
user preferences.
Yeah.
Acha, acha. User preferences tools, not tools actually. It was the information you gather from the user preferences, and you compile that information. And yes, I have seen the literature that people have used, irrespective of the planning and architecture. What happens, most of the analysis in the GIS, what happens In the planning, what happens, you do during the analysis, because in planning exercises there is no such as design proposal all the time. It was like planning proposal. So we do analysis, at the end there are planning recommendation proposal. In architecture there should be some, at least some design should be as outcome. So it's a pre-designed phase. We use all these GIS analysis as I showed you.
So any other query from participants?
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Okay, thank you. I'm glad, and if any of you want to do any kind of get involved with this project, this is the project with the disabilities very close to our heart, you know, and is something I'm like finding new things every day, and yeah. What is the size of the team required for such projects? You know, size only depends, like we do all the surveys to student, and this GIS thing, you can say I am doing all by myself. I take students help. We always appoint interns who knows GIS, like our planning students or other students in the masters of planning student, and we do such thing. Originally this project has lots of architects involved, a lot of 5-6 like faculties are architects over here. They are involved, 5-6 planning faculties, like I'm in the department of planning. So, and there are also the other professor over here, he is also involved in that project. So 5-6 people you need, and also for doing surveys and all that stuff, you need interns. And we are you know, managing with this much of resource and strength. So in the bits and pieces, and that's all, because we do have a full-time job, right? So yeah, in that way.
Okay, so thank you very much, ma'am, for sharing your expertise and experience with us. Uh, Actually, we now all believe that, like we have seen that the real strength of this software is in spatial analysis, and you showed through various examples in case study, your actual work. You showed us that how it becomes so easy, and how to visualize and how to interpret and then present the information in a very interesting way and very authentic way. So I think you convinced also to use this software. I think most of the participants will be using. You first mentioned that you don't usually they learn, but they don't use. But I think all of us must be using in future also, and this will be the success of this will be the measurement of the success of this program. So I hope it happens. Also, thank you very much, ma'am, for your valuable time and your efforts for this training program. Thank you very much.
You are welcome, ma'am. And in the chat box, I put the book name, and so in the 1 month or so, it will be available at the Indian market, I believe. And also the paper which I showed reference. Ma'am, have you made any WhatsApp group or anything
Yes,
of
yes,
all the
ma'am.
participants? Yes.
Okay.
So a ma'am can circulate that paper also that we wrote on Ujjain, and it was being very much appreciated. So more and more work is needed. If anybody else is doing that kind of work and want to connect with us, we'll be very happy to impart whatever knowledge we do have regarding that. We'll be very interested to do so. Okay, so thank you. Have a nice day to all of you, and have a nice evening also. So, ma'am, can I leave?
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you once again, ma'am.
Yeah, so see you guys tomorrow. I think I'm